Hello, Rise. Welcome to an edition of Lunch with Gina. We're really thrilled to be here. I hope you are, well, I've heard that many of you are really loving Lunch with Gina as it's an inside peek into what the culture of an independent school is like for families of color. Whether you are a prospective family or you're currently enrolled, we want to bring to you situations, narratives, stories, experiences that are real and are held by different stakeholders in the school, whether it's a parent or an educator or an administrator or a student. Today, I'm really thrilled. It's Women's History Month, and we have a badass woman named, yes, I said that, but it's, badass is a nice, great hashtag. And her name is Shanelle Robinson. Hi, Shanelle, how are you?
Hi, Gina. I'm well, thank you.
Good. So Shanelle is with us as Director of Diversity and Multicultural Affairs at Friends Academy. Tell us a little bit about Friends Academy, Shanelle.
Sure. Friends Academy is actually a co-educational school, independent school in Long Island. We have a very long Quaker history and identity, which I can talk a little bit more about. But in terms of location, we are in Locust Valley, Long Island, which is right outside of Glen Cove, about 15 minutes outside of Queens, so Nassau County, North Shore, Long Island, and we pull students from all over the island, both east and west, north and south, but also have a number of families who actually do commute to the school from Queens, a couple from Brooklyn, but bordering cities, bordering towns near Long Island as well. And our size is about 775. So again, pre-K through 12. And, pretty much people choose to come to Friends Academy based on our Quaker mission and identity. You don't have to be Quaker to attend Friends Academy, but people who, we call it similarly sentimented, it's a tongue twister, but those who believe in our identity and, character development and what we try to instill in children.
Great. So tell me, how does the values that exist at Friends Academy inform the work that you do around diversity and multicultural affairs?
Absolutely. It's actually what drew me here to Friends. I've been in the field of diversity work for a long time, nearly 20 years at this point, which is so hard to believe. But when I found the position or saw the position at Friends, I didn't know anything about Quakerism and Quaker schools and what that meant. And the more I learned, the more I read and researched, it was really that Quaker mission and identity, those values that you talked about, that drew me both to the school as well as a position like this in an independent school. I have been doing diversity work in independent schools and with independent schools for a number of years, and the idea of actually a Quaker school having this position, Quakers are known for equality and integrity, diversity, those things. And so what does that look like? What does that mean situated within a Quaker school to be able to work with the full range of the community, from students, youngest to oldest, to faculty and staff, to parents, to the board, really looking at how do we live this Quaker mission? How do we really live Quaker values and what that means for diversity and social justice? It's one thing to have, the historical knowledge of Quakerism and the light of God in everyone. We talk about letting your lives speak. How do we translate that to everyday deeds? How do we translate that to how we respect each other and talk to each other within the community, both inside and outside of the classroom? And how do we translate that into the types of students that we're putting out into the world with college and beyond?
Mm-hmm. So I'm gonna jump right into the meat of it, because you have an amazing diversity networking event coming up, your third annual Institute for Teaching Diversity and Social Justice. And it's in June. Tell us a little bit more about that, because to me, that's some next level stuff. I mean, it's one thing to be director of diversity in an independent school, but you're creating this community, this environment, this exchange that is elevating the work and requiring more, it sounds like, of educators to be able to teach that in the classroom.
Mm-hmm. So really looking at, kind of speaking to what I mentioned earlier, and how do we take that diversity work, that diversity mission, you know, our own understanding and cultural competency with curriculum and others, how do we take that to the next level of understanding, both on a personal level as well as the intellectual level? And so the idea I had behind creating this Institute for Teaching Diversity and Social Justice is that it's not just the work of a diversity director to do so, but also our educators, right? Our teachers in the classroom. The classroom is constantly changing and evolving. There's the actual curriculum that we teach, the what, right? The what are we teaching? Who are we teaching about? How are we teaching it? What's our own understanding, a level of knowledge and comfort in our subject areas? You know, we don't know what we don't know, for example. And we might also get comfortable teaching something a certain way. So we're teaching from our own vantage point, but also the other component of the Institute is also understanding ourselves. So whether it's racial identity development, whether it's really unpacking history and historical events and how that has shaped both our own personal identities as well as the identities of others, whether it's our students, whether it's other educators, the way in which we understand history and historical events, what's the narrative, and how does that impact me in my role as a math teacher, a biology teacher, you know, an English teacher, what's the interconnection and the intersections of identity, as then translating that to our students. So it's doing a lot of work in 4 days, but doing a lot of work looking at not just how I teach and what I teach, but also who am I as an educator? You know, what's my role in the classroom? What's the lens that I use to both view my students as well as my curriculum, and how are they seeing me? Because some of the challenges we see in the diverse classroom, and we can define diversity in a number of ways. Some of the challenges we see is that cross-cultural communication and understanding and those intersections, sometimes that can bring the rub in not realizing how someone shows up in the classroom or how we're interpreting, you know, someone else in the classroom or outside of the classroom, because it happens between peers as well, you know, with faculty in the lunchroom, let's say, or in the faculty room. And so really creating a space to unpack all of that, talk about all of that, and at the end of those 4 days, leaving with a strategic action plan to take back to your school, your classroom, on ways to be able to talk about, recognize, identify areas of social justice in your curriculum, in your work, whatever your role is as an educator on your campus.
Bravo, brava, I should say. As a parent of students who are going into their 11th and 8th year in an independent school, they have had time to sit in the classroom. They have had years of a particular curriculum done a particular way, and old enough and aware enough now to question the competency, right? That cultural competency around curriculum. Am I seeing reflections of myself and windows through which to see myself in my English class, in my history class? You know, is this one view versus another? And when you talk about that intersectionality, you know, what is it like for a Black girl to sit in a class and to have conversations about slavery or conversations about everything else other than Black culture, right? How does that affect me? And to then address it, now it might sound like I'm talking about something I know here, right, experience, but then to address that with a teacher and that teacher kind of fall flat and not have anything to, no empathy really for the situation to begin with, right? So you talk about dealing with yourself first, right? This is the way it's always been done. This is another perspective and maybe perhaps the only. So I think the work that you're doing is powerful, right? And to help educators kind of shift that mindset about how they come to the classroom, how they present their curriculum, and how they help other students, not just students of color, but their white students kind of have a full view. So year 3, are you finding that educators are coming back? And what have some of the testimonials been? What are they saying they've walked away with?
Right. I haven't at this point have educators come back, but I've had educators send right? Their peers, they've recommended the Institute to other faculty or administrators at their school. And so, testimonials have talked about their own transformative experience, waking up kind of this idea of, wow, I didn't know that I didn't know this information, or the way in which it's presented. It's like, I knew this, however, I did not know the ripple effects, or what, the alternative results from a particular event in our history, actually how that affected other people. There's something, I think about in terms of an activity that we do around a timeline of historical events. And while we know the executive orders, for example, or we know the historical events, we know what is written, we know the narrative, we know, what has been presented throughout history. But when you really unpack it to see what other groups of people in our world, not even just our country, but in our world, that have been affected by some of the laws, some of the historical events that have taken place, those are the things that are not necessarily taught. Those are the things that are not necessarily talked about. And how does that trickle down? How does that get passed down? And so a number of the testimonials that we received have talked about this awakening and this desire to go out and learn more, or to revise their own curriculum and how they are teaching, and who and what they're teaching about, as well as, like I mentioned before, the referrals of other people in their school communities who might also benefit from training and conversations like this one. Even just the personal piece, just the opportunity in the first, 2 or 3 days into the Institute to be able to unpack self and do our own self-work on who we are, not just as an educator, but as an individual. What values do we hold? What's our own understanding of race, of gender and gender identity, of class? A lot of the things we've been taught not to discuss, we discuss them, right? We discuss them and do our own work as adults, as individuals, and as educators, to then be able to talk about how do we help students in their own journeys along these same areas. It's not easy. It's not easy work. And we start to, realize that throughout the course of the Institute, and again, leave with strategies for individuals to take back with them. And I'm always available and make myself available throughout, both during the Institute and afterwards, as a resource to be able to continue to help educators along their journey with understanding how to teach for diversity and social justice. So, certainly I'm always appreciative of those who come, and our attendance has continued to grow over the years. We actually added the 4th day. It started out as a 3-day Institute. We added the 4th day as a result of testimonials who said we could use more time, we could use an extra day. There's so much more to unpack and talk about. And so I'm, certainly grateful and appreciative of the opportunity to both do this and the way in which it's been received as professional development for educators.
Awesome. So we're going to make sure that we have information at the bottom of this clip so that educators can, so we're talking teachers and administrators?
Yes.
Okay.
And we have had representation from both independent and some public schools and charter schools who have heard about the program.
Oh, and that's even some more cross-cultural conversations right
Yes.
there. How do we unpack an independent school versus a public school? And I've always felt that our independent schools, because of our missions, because of that intellectual capacity to think deeply, to question purpose, and to be curious, allows us to have these conversations and to be supported and invested in, right?
Yes.
So if there's any unpacking to do, it can really happen well at an independent school. What do you think the impact is going to be or has been for students in the classroom? So, we have these more aware teachers, they've had this aha moment, and they're really kind of hungry for more information and different ways to approach it. What do you think it's done to impact the classroom?
I think, exactly what you've said, just having the educators themselves, having gone through this intensive program, the desire to continue learning has really trickled down into revision of curriculum, or how students work, how teachers work with students. Not just seeing the student as this kind of one-dimensional individual in their classroom, but really giving them the tools and skills to think beyond, how the student might be presenting themselves or why the student might be presenting themselves in this way, as well as the implicit bias we talk a lot about, and microaggressions and racial identity development, to be able to understand where both a child might be in a moment or in a classroom or in a context, right? And putting that in juxtaposition with larger society and what might be going on, as well as, again, the educator's role in that, or the way the educator is showing up in that moment. So there's a lot of uncomfortable conversation, that takes place, learning how to even to have the difficult conversation cross-racially or cross-gender or whatever those intersections are. We spend some time talking about how to do that. So at the end of the day, I certainly think it sends a more informed educator back to the school environment with new tools, new skills, new ways in which to approach both the student, the community, the curriculum, the work, and hopefully a desire to keep learning. I certainly hope, and I do think from what I hear from the educators who've attended, there is an increased desire to continue learning. And I know some of the graduates, if you would call them that, participants of this program have moved on and continued in other types of leadership programs, some diversity specific and other, more leadership building, leadership and character building, professional development workshops and opportunities and programs that will help them be better educators, more informed educators.
Mm-hmm. And we find ourselves in this social and political climate that we're in today, and it is very much a revisit of the past, right? Mm-hmm. And I think your institution is providing opportunities for educators and administrators to question information and to finally talk about it, right? So, if you don't learn your past, you're doomed to repeat it. And so I really am thankful and so appreciative, particularly because I have a child of color in the classroom that wants to make sure that not only are they acknowledged, but that they're safe, right? In these conversations, they're safe. That their voice will be heard, that there are different perspectives, and that they won't be shut down because an educator just feels a little uncomfortable and doesn't know quite how they will handle the classroom if we move forward and be brave and lean into discomfort. So again, I thank you for that. So the Institute is June, what day?
June 20th through June 23rd, 2017. Okay. It'll be here on the campus of Friends Academy.
So you're housing folks?
We don't have housing. We have nearby hotels that there's information on the website, and then I can certainly, speak to people one-on-one about some referrals. But everything else is here on campus from 9 to 4 every day.
And just give us an idea of some of the topics that will be discussed.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So some of the standard topics that we cover each year include racial identity development, includes looking at definitions of diversity, social justice, oppression, putting it within this overall matrix and framework of privilege and marginalization and understanding social identity and some of the, there's I think we call them the big 8, looking at race and gender and sexual orientation, religion, class, and those sorts of things, but also more broadly defining some of those identifiers. The key to this particular institute is really looking at intersectionality. It's not just about race. It's not just about any one identifier, but really trying to look at a broad cross-section of them all and how they intersect. We are all intersectional beings. And so how do we identify ourselves? There's a piece that I do looking at our cultural lenses. And so, again, how do I view the world? How does the world view me? How have I come to this notion of self, and what does that mean? There is a piece on history, the timeline of historical events and what that has meant and who that has impacted in our world and in our country specifically, and the intersectionality of those things. We end with the strategic planning piece around curriculum development to take back to schools within your specific subject or specific grade with an anti-bias social justice lens. So how can we help you re-lens curriculum for social justice standards, for example? And so we talk about what is multicultural education? What does anti-bias education mean? What does it look like? And each year, we invite a guest speaker to spend a day with us. The first year we had Howard Stevenson from University of Pennsylvania talking about, again, the difficult conversations around race. How do we engage in conversation? We look at racial stress and where we feel that, how we feel that, and how that might impede conversation between individuals when the topic of race is on the table. Our second year, we had Allie Michael, also from UPenn, coming to talk about racial identity development, particularly what she helped us also unpack was white racial identity development and white ally racial identity development. And so, again, looking at stages of development, particularly along racial lines, but also with a social justice lens, and how can we be allies to others in this work. This summer, we're delighted to have Carrie Davis join us. She is the filmmaker, director who made the documentary A Girl Like Me, when she was a high school student, actually, where she recreated the Clark doll studies from the 50s and 60s, and unfortunately found a lot of the same results even today. And she recreated it, I think, in 2005.
Yes.
And, overwhelmingly students of color was still preferring, right, the white doll for many reasons of, what that meant and resembled and represented to them. And so she'll talk a little bit about that and racial ID development, but also where her work has taken her. From this point, she's since graduated. She's still directing and making films. She's just wrapping up a project around the work she's done in Ferguson, Missouri, with a lot of what has gone on there. And also, she herself, with her own experience from then to now, has done a lot of work in advocacy and social justice, Black Lives Matter movement, and how to be allies and advocate any importance, the role of teachers and educators in the classroom, teaching our students not just about these historical events, but how do we educate young people for the future, right? So like you said before, we're not doomed to repeat what has happened before, but with all that has gone on in the world, where we currently sit in the world, how do we better educate students to be able to be more informed and go out into the world and advocate for equality and justice? And so that's what she'll be joining us to talk about this year.
Well, hence a day 4, because that's a lot of heavy lifting, right? That's some heavy stuff. I know you have some self-care built into that, right?
Yes.
And I love that, we're spreading this work, and it's not just the sole job of the director of diversity. That's even if a school has one, right?
Right.
It should be filtered into the classroom. And so you're in a very important position to help make sure that happens. So we want to thank you again. We want to make sure that we get as many educators as we can to this institute for the benefit of all children. But definitely, when I think about my children of color, the work that you're doing and how that will create an environment in the classroom that is totally positive and safe. Again, I just thank you for that work. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so thank you for joining us. We'll be back with another edition of Lunch with Gina. But this is some seriously good work with this racial identity and social justice work. And we're going to, again, make sure that we have information down at the bottom so that you can share with your teacher, perhaps, right?
Yes.
You might want to check this out, okay? We've had a few conversations this year, teacher, and this is my gift to you, okay? So thank you again, Shanelle, and we'll talk to you soon, okay? And good luck with this summer.
Thank you.